Hey, so I'm already ready to go. My dad and I, we're going to go out to my favorite restaurant. We're gonna have a fun little time, just the two of us. Gonna go wearing this with like these heels here, so they go with the earrings and the makeup. And today has been an interesting day because this is the third video I'm recording today, which kind of like tells me that I'm not, all there. I'm a little something. I don't know whether there's something is a little down, a little up. I'm still doing things, I'm still going places, I'm still putting effort into like how I look, and all those things usually mean that I am somewhat okay. Naturally, like the okay can turn into, me being a little manic, which is not what I want. And also, like, I don't feel like I'm a little manic. I think that was pretty much where I was at, and then we went down. And now, right now, I'm just here, maybe a little down here, but I don't fully know where I'm at mentally. I don't know how to properly process some of the things I'm feeling. I mentioned this earlier, but like I'm getting some, I wouldn't call it ideation yet, but I'm definitely in that place mentally. I'm definitely somewhat there, at a point, at the tipping point, where I may, start to feel that way. And if I start feeling that way, I might start doing things, and that's the whole issue that I don't want to. Honestly, like I don't think I can stop it. To be completely honest, like it's going to happen, and then I'm gonna take medication, I'm gonna change medication, I'm gonna do things, and then I'm gonna be better. But I don't think that I can, stall it. Maybe I can stall it, but I can, forbid it from happening. And I don't know. I don't know like how worried I should be, like because I'm definitely thinking things. But should I start, reaching out? Because I'm keeping my parents, on the loop. Like in the loop. Kind of like when the changes I'm having mentally, I'm like sharing them, with my doctors, with my therapist, so everybody like knows where I'm at mentally. The issue is now, like what does that mean, in the future? Will like this stop here? Because I've kind of like come to accept that I will always, a part of me will always crave death, will always crave the end. And even when I'm like doing like really well up here, there's always going to be a little bug in my brain that is kind of getting ideas there, and as I said, it is something that is going to happen. I'm not accepting it. I'm not just being like it's okay that it's happening, or just giving up. I'm not. It's just that for me to deal with the problem, I have to first accept it, and accepting it involves just me, like being real with myself, and like the way I feel about things. And that is kind of like all I can do sometimes, just be real with myself. Like sometimes there's no strength in me to fight it, or to even like put up a fight. It's not, because sometimes like you try to put up a fight, you don't end up fighting, but you're really trying that. And sometimes not even that, not even, yeah, I don't even get that. I'm Anyways, the point I'm actually not trying to make any point right now. I'm just getting my thoughts out there, because I feel better when I do that. I feel, yeah, it feels like, ultimately I'm like stuck in the cycle, in this circle, and then I always end up getting back to the same place. But by getting things out there, I kind of like stalled the process a little bit. I feel a little kind of okay for like a little while. It doesn't last long, as I mentioned, but for a while it lasts. I don't know, like even if like it doesn't accomplish anything in the end, it means that I've extended my life for at least like an hour, and that's good. That is kind of like what everybody wants. I don't know if that's what I want, as I've already mentioned, but sometimes it doesn't matter what you want. Sometimes like what you want is very destructive, very self-destructive. So it's better for you to just rely on what other people want for you. Naturally, you shouldn't just leave with like their expectations. You should, be you should be you, basically. But sometimes doing you is really bad for you. And it's on the part of me is like just let it be. Same thing with like with other people. Like they want to do bad things to themselves, and like they have the right to do that. Part of me is like that, and then the other part is like, yeah, but like like as long as I always talk about this, like as long as you are not harming yourself or others. I think when I was younger, it was just like as long as you're not harming others, you can just harm yourself. Until like age has gotten me, okay, you're not harming yourself or others. Because not that I think that we have to save people from themselves. Like that is very, savior, white knight, shining armor. But you know, like sometimes it's that people need a little moment to themselves where they can just despair. That is, you know, something that's been on my mind lately. Like not just lately, it is something that has been in my head. Like every once in a while, I'll think about this. You know, how I will indulge in despair, and it is not healthy. I know, but it does feel good. You know, like it's kind of like it's very self-indulgent. You know, like it's very because sometimes like you're just fearing, you know, what's going to happen, and then when you allow yourself to actually feel, you know, that the bad thing happening, it is liberating in some ways. You know, I think about myself at different points in my life where there were things that were things that were, you know, like I was trying so hard to fight them, but you know, in the end I couldn't, and you know, it was okay, and I just embraced it. And you know, like that was the first step towards like me getting better, you know, accepting, like, you know, not accepting like that is inherently going to happen, but that it can happen. You know, the thing about fear, you kind of have to embrace it. When I say face it, or you know, or face it, but when I say like face your fears, I don't necessarily mean like, you know, if you're afraid of spiders, you know, just go and touch a spider. Not that. It's just, you know, face the fact that you're scared. You know, face, you know, like the idea in your mind of like a spider. You know, like in a contained environment that, you know, you're kind of like safe. You know, that's pretty much what I mean when you face your fears. Not necessarily just throw yourself out there, particularly because a lot of our fears are very they're founded in like very, you know, good things. You know, like for example, you don't fear dying. Like there's a reason why, you know, we fear things. So, anyways, my point, as I said, I don't have a point, but I just wanted to get some thoughts out of my head. You know, the whole thing with my fantasies is just this ongoing thing. It has always been the case. Like I have no reason to believe that it's going to change like right now. But you know, you can always hope. Basically, I try not to hope or to create expectations because that invariably leads to disappointment. I know that it doesn't always lead to disappointment, but like the situations when it doesn't, they're so rare, so far in between that like it's not really worthy of consideration. You know, you just, you know, act like, you know, like not expecting anything, and that's good. That is, that's not, I don't know, probably not healthy. But there's so many things I do that are not healthy. You know, I went to visit my friend, as I said, and this, you know, she has a lot of issues, like physically and mentally. So, you know, we relate. And, you know, like that's pretty much the gist of a lot of the things I would say. Is like, you know, like I'm doing my math today, you know, like I have these issues. For example, she has a lot of like physical issues. So we're talking, and she said, like, okay, my head is okay, you know, this week, but then her body isn't. And sometimes, like, you have to take these little victories, you know, like even if like they are kind of like small and they feel insignificant, because you know, if you don't, you're going to end up back in despair. And as I said, it can be liberating to, you know, allow yourself to despair, but you can't live there. You know, you can't, you know, just let yourself stay there for too long. Otherwise, like you lose your verve, you know, your will to live, your will to do things. And yeah, talking about this and remembering of the assessment tomorrow, I've kind of, you know, started, you know, preparing. It's not like a statement because, as I said, I'm mostly there to answer questions, but you know, just putting everything in order, like as far as like, okay, what happened, when it happened, how long things have been this way, what changed, you know, what my symptoms are, what, you know, like all this, you know, things that you're gonna ask. And a lot of this, like, I don't have to plan. For example, I mean, maybe I should. Maybe I should plan. You know, for example, talking about like a timeline. Maybe I should plan something, because I'll probably be like, oh, you know, kind of like it's not stalling, but like I'll have to, you know, remember, make an effort to remember, and that's not. I don't know. Like, there's only so much time. This is something that they said, you know, the lawyers when they sent me like kind of like some, you know, guidance as to like how to, you know, go there, how to be there, to behave. Is that, you know, like that man is, or that woman, like is going to, you know, be there for like hours and hours. You know, mine is 4 p.m, so it's going to be closer to the end of the day. But there's only so much attention that they can, you know, spend on you. So, you know, you want to be kind of like objective and straightforward. You know, not that I wouldn't be objective, but like, you know, like giving information more, you know, directly can be good. So I have kind of like, you know, prepared that in my head. I still have to do a little like research. Say research, I mean like basically go through my head in terms of like, as I said, creating a timeline and, you know, like what everything was. And I do have like all the documents, all, you know, the doctors, you know, prescriptions and letters and reports and everything. So like it's not going to be necessarily hard, you know, to come across that, like timeline, but it is something I have to sit down and do. Maybe I don't have to necessarily sit down, I just have to dedicate some time to it. I feel like I'm stalling, to be completely honest. Like I've been willing to do this for like what, a week, and I haven't done it. Honestly, I might do it today as we are at the restaurant waiting for like our food. Like that. It could be something like I'm going to try to be in the moment, so I won't be checking any messages and socials or anything. But that's something that I can kind of like do, and I can talk to my dad, and because he was part of like this whole journey, this whole process, so he can give me his perspective. Yeah, basically like the whole thing of like me communicating with people around me, what's happening. A lot of this lately has been like, okay, remember to tell like the specialist that, remember to tell the person assessing you that, and it's a lot of things to remember, so maybe I should just create a little list in my head. It's going to help me be more not necessarily objective, but like more straightforward. Also, like that's not the word, more like direct, with no like us and anything. But yeah, so that's kind of me right now. I am in this, I mentioned this earlier, it feels like I'm kind of in a limbo, where I'm like not up there, I'm not down there. I'm kind of stable, but not really. I'm starting to have these thoughts of death again, and I'm losing some of my energy. I still have like enough energy to get things done, so I'm not super bad yet, but it does feel like that might be the case. I mean, the first day, yesterday, was like really bad. Like I went from like from 100 to 0 really quickly, and then today, and then today, like, I didn't, wake up at 0, but I also didn't wake up at 100, which was kind of like the case lately. So I'm somewhere in between, and yeah, but like it's still like above 50%, I'd say. 50 being kind of at this point. I mean, I think the 50 is like stability, but like not so much. I feel like 50 is already bad. I think that like 80%, like that is like. At 80%, you are stable. Anything above that is manic, and everything below that is depressed. And it's kind of interesting because, as I mentioned before, like I usually, my depressive episodes, they last longer than my manic episodes. And sometimes by a lot. Sometimes I've gone, for weeks, I don't know, months, like, being depressed. And then all I had of mania was like a couple of days. Which was very unfair, I mean, like as I said, like you lose your filter, so it's kind of dangerous. So it's better for you to like not have energy to do things, even if you in this state you're thinking more directly about the things you want to do, in terms of like ending it all. So yeah, so I don't really have any guidelines. I mean, I never really have guidelines, you just have experience, things that happened before, and then you trust that they will happen again. That's kind of like my whole reality. There's so many things that I've come to accept that they're gonna happen, like I have no reason, because just because something happened in the past doesn't mean that it's going to happen in the future. Like those connections, like we end up making ourselves, like of course, like there is like the practical element of like this, for example, like you do the same you do the math on something for like 100 times, and 99 100 you get one result, then there's kind of like there is likelihood, like a chance that that is going to always be the answer, or there is going to be the next answer, but it's the whole thing, like just because something happened in the past, like we don't know, there's so many things we do not know as facts, like we have these estimations based on like what has happened in the past, but we don't really know with like 100% certainty, like, and it's, yeah, there's, it's not like, I feel like when I was younger, I would be more upset about that. I wanted certainty. Like uncertainty was one of my biggest enemies, like that's pretty much one of the things that generated the most fear in my life, and that led to like the worst decisions, the worst thinking processes, everything, the worst like demeanor that I've had. To this day, like fear can still be very corrosive, for me. It's just that I'm more I have a better understanding of like what I fear, and why I fear those things. Because sometimes, just knowing what I fear is already pretty great, particularly because sometimes like feelings, they can be so overwhelming and they're so convoluted, there's a lot of like things involved. So if you're able to pin it down to like something, or some things, it is very helpful. But sometimes like knowing that is enough to kind of like to stall the fear, or sometimes even stop it completely. But I feel like some of maybe the more complex fears that we have, like you need more than just like a just knowing what it is. You need to know why. You have to go deeper. And yeah, I'm at a point where I think that the biggest fears I've had in my life in general, in the past 27 years, like I know why they're there, I know where they come from, I know what, potentializes them. Is that even a word? What like streamlines them, what, like triggers them. I know those things. But sometimes just knowing what it is, and even knowing why is not enough. Sometimes you need an action plan, but like it's kind of hard because like the whole thing of like not thinking, well, not wanting to think about something, it just makes you want to think about it more. Or maybe you don't want to think about it more, but like thinking about it regardless, because like putting all this effort into like that one action, like it's kind of hard to forget. So sometimes you need an action plan, but it's kind of hard because in all honesty, like sometimes I have no idea how to stop things. Like I know my fears, I know why I fear them, but I know what makes what triggers them. But like sometimes it feels like even if I'm like in a safe place, in a safe space, in a situation where like there's like I'm kind of like protected from like those threats, like I'm still feeling that way. Of course, like putting things away, like it really helps. Like I talked about how kind of like just cutting off like all my social media, and like no longer keeping track of the news and all that, like how it has been very helpful to my brain, because I spend way less time obsessing over things, over like the little extremities in my brain, my fears and all that. And it's interesting because like if I compare myself to like 5 years ago, or to 10 years ago, like I'm still spending so much time and effort on my mental health. But like things have definitely changed, for the better. I feel like the world has gone worse, but like my head has gone better. It's not that it is going great or even good. A lot of the time, kind of stuck in this limbo, as I mentioned before. But the things I'm struggling with, like they're different. So I think about like 15, and it was very reactionary. I was very scared a lot of the time, and as I said, like at that point, I was barely aware of my fears, and I also didn't know why I feared them. And then 5 years ago, I kind of like I knew my fears, but I didn't necessarily know why. And right now, like I know what and why, and now I need to say how. And some days it is easier to deal with these things than some other days. Not shocking, like it's just how life works. Like you're doing better some days than others. I wanted that to be more of a science when I was younger. I wanted to be able to foresee which days I'll be doing well and which days I wouldn't, so I could try to kind of like do more in the days I was doing well. Actually, like I wanted to eliminate the days where I wasn't doing well, which is not doable for any human being. I know, but being more mentally stable, it does mean that like there's like less variability. And it's interesting because like 5 years ago, I was having these thoughts of death. 10 years ago, I was also having these thoughts of death. They were a little bit more masked, and I was doing a lot of projecting, and I mean, I wasn't good at compromising, but I was projecting a lot of myself into other realities. I was using a lot of my fantasies to kind of like help me deal with just existing. But those thoughts were already there, like, and I hated them, and I tried to push them down, and that works most of the time, but like not all the time. Honestly, like not even most of the time. I was just a mess. I think outwardly, like I kind of like was very tame, very quiet, very nondescript, but internally it was just really messy. And I think I was trying to make my exterior like that, so maybe kind of like fake it to make it, like it was maybe like the external reality could just I'm talking about me, not like my surroundings. I was very I don't think I was shy, but a lot of people probably say that. It's just that I wasn't really interested in interacting with people, so I just stayed in my own corner, just doing my own things. And a lot of people saw that as like me being shy. I was also very awkward, socially awkward, so I think that didn't help with the whole impression. Also, I'm neurodivergent, so like that is like I'm never going to be performing socially as well as somebody who is as a neurotypical person. Like, that doesn't bother me. That honestly has never really bothered me. It's not really one of the things that like I cared about. Like, there are definitely moments, I was talking this about it the other day, where I've had these moments where I'm like, why am I like this? Like, everybody else is doing great. I know they're not, but it seems that everybody else is at least doing it, and then some days I can't even do it. So it feels like, what's wrong with me? And the whole line of thinking, that is something that when I was younger, I would never really allow myself to think that way, because I wanted to preserve this image for to myself, that I was perfect and that I was great and that I was destined to great things, and that just the way I was, I was going to acquire knowledge, but I didn't really have to detract, remove anything from the way I was, particularly because it's hard, to change yourself, particularly when like the things like you don't really make sense for you. Like, why do I have to remove this? And because I have no desire to remove that, other than this might get in the way of me achieving the things I want, right? And sometimes like there were things that I wanted to change because the environment I was inserted in was like, okay, that is wrong, even though that made no sense whatsoever. But like that's just how like things work. They've always worked like that. There's always been expectations that we've placed upon people, for the way that they should be, based on like who, based on like demographic factors, like, so let's say age, gender, ethnicity, race, culture, religion, I guess like, ability, like, like you being, for example, like neurotypical, neurodivergent, or being like mentally ill or not, or having some physical disability. Like, all these things, they exist, and like the people, I won't say just people in general, because at least for me, I came from like a mostly supportive environment, so all these little idiosyncrasies, all these little, like little, quirks that I might have had, people were kind of fine with them, just some other things that they were not. But this is not what this video is about. I'm particularly not caring about that right now. I'm particularly like okay with where I am at, and people, because sometimes like like everybody is allowed to have an opinion, but some opinions are stupid. And on one way, I'm like, yeah, people should be allowed to have their stupid opinions. But on the other, like, if the people in question are like making laws or changing things, they're in charge of something, like, then that's the problem. But there's always been a problem, like the few making decisions for the many, in a way that benefited them and not everybody else. Like, nothing new here. It's been like this since the dawn of humanity. I have no doubt that even Neanderthals were having like issues like that. Maybe not as complex or complicated as the ones we have today, but I'm pretty sure like this happens everywhere, like in the animal kingdom or otherwise. But anyways, what I'm getting at here, I don't know what I'm getting at here. I'm just saying things that I said, getting like my anxiety is out there, so I feel better, and I'm no longer yeah, I don't think that this is going to make me like less likely to be like altered as I am. But at least, as I said, it buys me like an extra hour, getting these thoughts out there. It means that the next hour I'll be kind of free. I mean, like, honestly, an extra hour seems very generous. Like, half an hour even seems generous, so maybe it's just like a couple of minutes. But like as I said, that is a good addition. Like, that is 5 minutes more than I would have, that I didn't have otherwise. Also, like, talking like this, even if a lot of the stuff that I see, it feels like I already knew that, it can kind of like put things in order. It gives me like a different perspective to my head than I might have had otherwise. And I may even have like some breakthrough moments here where I kind of like had these moments. I had honestly, I'm very reflective person, so I spend a lot of my time with myself. So even when I go to therapy, it's usually me kind of like stating the discoveries I made that week. It's not just me discovering things. Of course, there's like some exceptions here and there. There are some days where I'm like, oh my god, I'm just realizing something new, and I might not have realized this if I wasn't in this particular context. So, but the thing is, like, I think therapy is important for everybody, even if you don't have any trauma, any issues to deal with, like, even if like you're perfectly fine, or so you think. Because nobody's ever like perfectly fine. Like, you can be delusional like that, and I am like that sometimes. But like, nobody's doing well all the time. Honestly, even like people at the very top who I despise, who I have not to do this. Like, I know that they are not, thriving every moment of their lives. Or sometimes like even like like making mistakes, publicly and embarrassingly, just in a way that really harms a lot of people's lives like that. does not excuse anything. Like as I said, I feel like no sympathy for any of those people, but you know, like, yeah, like those things they are a weight in itself, in themselves. So there's that. But yeah, but basically what I was trying to say, once again, I wasn't really trying to say anything. That's just like something I say a lot. It's kind of like a crutch that I have, you know, a language crutch. It's just that, yeah, like I'm kind of, okay, I think it's time to go. Bye.